Don't we rumble? Float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Ah, rumble, young man, rumble. Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!
It's time to get in the ring with the Cornerman, preparing dentists for the next round. We give you business insights, trends, and timely information. And we'll interview experts to help you make smart financial decisions. Now, here are your Cornermen, Rob Joyce and Mike Bark.
Welcome to the Cornerman podcast. I'm Meagan Rutkowski with Spaeth Financial. I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Walsh. And today we have Jerod Spaeth from the Spaeth Barrett Group. He is a financial planner, 401k provider with us. So thank you, Jerod. Just wanted to mention too, last fall, the Financial Times put out the 401 best 401k providers in the country. So Jerod is one of 8 listed in Wisconsin, which is pretty cool. And so those the people that are on this list advise at least $75 million in defined contribution plan assets and have at least 20% of their client assets in defined contribution plans. So I feel like we have an expert with us today. Thank you, Jerod.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll see where expert goes.
So can you just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction. I've been in the business 18 years. I've built up a team of about 13 individuals. We're working on a new hire this month. But primarily what we do, we have 2 separate business lines. One is personal financial planning. We specialize in multi-generation planning for families. They look to us as their CFO, their most trusted advisor, and we help coordinate the overall planning as well as helping to coordinate all the other advisors that sit around the table and give them one main person to discuss goals and strategies with. And then we bring in other advisors to deal with the specialties as necessary. And then, as you mentioned, the other side of my business is business benefits. One of those, yes, being retirement plans, 401ks, but we also deal with just general benefits consulting and product placement for businesses and business owners as well.
Great. So the main reason I brought you on today is we wanted to talk about a lot of our clients, as you know, we have the dental niche, and they're single dentists. They have 5 to 20 employees, and they've either purchased a practice or started a practice. And the question is, what sort of retirement plan is best for those type of clients? I mean, we know we have the simple out there, the 401k. Can you maybe talk about which plan you would start a new dentist on, or what you would recommend for somebody purchasing a practice, or just maybe go through the 3 types of plans?
Yeah, a lot of it clearly has to deal with profitability and, putting something like that into place. I mean, clearly rewarding and retaining employees is probably a big deal and high up on the list, especially in this environment where there might be a lot of competition for, knowledgeable workers. When you get into buying a practice and there's a debt load that might be out there and you're tempted to pay that back a little faster, some of these plans you might want to consider, how does that impact that? And it's going to be up to clearly the priority here of the dentist or business owner. Kind of first, though, on that list is what we'll call a SEP IRA. It stands for Simplified Employee Pension. I'm going to bring this one up first because we see it less often, but it is an interesting concept. There's some flexibility to it. It's a retirement plan component that if you're they typically work well with closely held businesses or one owner businesses with few employees. So if your dentist is just starting out and they have 1 or 2 individuals and maybe they're part-time, but the dentist is doing a majority of the work and wants to really increase their opportunity for retirement plan savings, the SEP is pretty efficient. It's got a maximum contribution level of $58,000 a year or $25,000 of total compensation, whatever is less. Now, the interesting thing, even though that we can get a bunch of dollars into a plan like that, right, is that unfortunately you're going to have to give the same percentage of your employee's wage in that plan. So if you, the business owner, want to dump in 25% of your compensation, 25% of each one of your employees' compensation has to go in that plan as well. There are no options for employee deferrals, so this is all employer-based contribution. However, it's very simple to kind of set up and administer, which is great. And like I said, for a new dentist just starting out with a low staff but high income and wants to sock some serious dollars away, that offer is a pretty compelling scenario. Like I said, we see it rarely these days, and it's really because of the employer-only contribution side of things. Most of our retirement plan providers want their employees to have some skin in the game to be able to make contributions and deferrals. So that the SEP kind of takes a back seat, but it is available. If there's a family group of dentists as well, it would work pretty well with that. Brother, sister, father, son, father, daughter type kind of scenarios. Those tend to work out pretty efficiently. Again, like I said, are relatively rare. Next up, though, from an easy perspective is the Simple IRA. The Simple IRA is designed for 100 employees or less. Typically, we're seeing these under 20 employees or less. The reason why I say that is with Simple IRA is, as the name implies, it's an IRA component. It's an individual retirement account. So your employees each have an account that they are capable of making deferrals to from their salary up to $13,500 a year. They get an extra $3,000 a year for a age 50 catch-up. And then you, as the employer, can make employer match components. You could either choose a flat 2% for everybody in the plan or a scaled 1 to 3% match based on employee contributions. The reason why simple doesn't stand for it has a synonym, right, to easy. It's not exactly what it stands for, but this plan is easy to set up in the fact that it has very little administration headache associated with it. And again, because all these accounts are individual retirement accounts at that level, if somebody leaves the plan, they could take their IRA with them very easily. There's not, again, a lot of administration having to deal with somebody who left the plan and to get assets out, or dealing with rollovers of assets out, or loans, or those types of things. You don't need a third-party administrator. There's not any heavy filing to do with the IRS, even though it's an ERISA-controlled plan. This is probably the plan that if I were a new dentist, I'd start up almost immediately, just because of how simplistic the administration is. Downside to it, though, especially for a dentist or high-income earners, is that cap of $13,500 for deferrals. We also are limited only to pre-tax deferrals. There are no Roth options inside the Simple IRA, so that's limiting there. The other limiting factor is, unfortunately, that employer match. You can't have that employer match be less than 3%, 2 out of a 5-year time period, and it can never be 0. So if you run into an issue where you've got cash flow problems, say mid-year, you can't turn that match off. That match is good to go for a full calendar year based on how you communicated to your employees the October through December time period, quarter 4 prior to that year. So a little less flexibility from that aspect. So again, it is pretty efficient to set up. Again, a brand new dentist wanting to get stuff rolling, this makes a lot of sense for very easy to find a provider. Vanguard, Fidelity does them immediately online without much intermediation. Of course, you can work through individuals like us to help you set one up. But they tend to get obsolete in our mind relatively quickly. The reason is a limitation of deferrals for certain individuals, and then the lack of real true plan design. And that's where the 401k comes in, kind of step 3 in this process. 401k is probably the most flexible component. Yes, it does have the 5,500 filing they're going to have to deal with the Department of Labor and ERISA. Yes, we're going to have a third-party administrator associated with it. Yes, we are going to have to find a platform to provide a 401k on. Vanguard, Fidelity, Voya, John Hancock, go on. But the good news is the flexibility in our mind is worth it. There's a little bit more in administrative costs, but for the flexibility, it's hands down where we would start with that. So the base 401k package can be relatively easy, right? We've got the capability of choosing a pre-tax or a Roth option We're designing most of our plans today with the Roth option for sure. It's one of the relatively newer pieces that are out there. I can't remember exactly how long Roth 401k options have been around. I think the last economic downturn, 08 or 09, somewhere in there, they kind of popped on board. But there's a lot of 401k plans out there that haven't added that plan provision yet. So it's very important to take a look at plan design on an annual basis to make sure, of course, your plan is working for what you'd like it to do. But anyway, the addition of being able to offer the pre-tax or Roth option and dial a match in that does not, of course, have to be provided on an annual basis and can be changed mid-year. So if there's a cash flow issue, the match component can be changed around. It can be zero for a long period of time. There's clearly a lot of employers out there right now with no match available because they needed the cash flow flexibility in this timeline. So again, some really good plan design flexibility. We've got some capability of, shutting out certain individuals from a contribution perspective based on a certain number of hours they work, how frequently they're working for you. Part-time individuals can be excluded to a certain degree. So there's a few more exclusions there than inside the simple that we can deal with as well. The nice thing then about the 401k base is that we can build from there. We can add a profit sharing component. This is where, again, the business is doing incredibly well, and the business owner might want to shove some additional dollars into the 401k. Again, profit sharing means that this is, of course, going to have to be shared with everybody in the plan. But again, we can max out to that same $58,000 cap that the SEP had through a deferral and profit sharing plan component. So that's usually the logical next step for our clients who have some additional dollars to save on a pre-tax basis. But we can go one step further past, the base 401k and profit sharing. We can move into something called a cash balance plan. This is a defined benefit plan. So the benefit formula needs to be the same for all employees, kind of very similar to the SEP rules, right? The benefit platform the formula needs to be the same. But when we have, let's say, older dentists or high-earning individuals and lower-earning individuals, contributions can go into a cash balance plan that discriminate across those components, whether it's length of service or income or age. The result of a cash balance plan is a capability to shove upwards of sometimes a couple $100,000 pre-tax into a retirement platform. This has a pension-like feel to it. It's designed to grow relatively slowly, so it's got a crediting rate that's attached with the growth of that component, so it's a relatively conservative crediting rate. It is some actuarial attention here, so we of course do have to deal with understanding how well the plan is funded. But it does offer up, especially for our high-performing businesses, especially, let's say, a dental partnership or group or even solo dentist, it offers another additional pretty significant pre-tax contribution upside as we build a plan design. So those are basically three parts. Thoughts, questions on those? What are you guys seeing out there these days as you're working with your clients?
Well, I do think, so you're bringing up the simple as like the first option to get somebody in the door. We do recommend the simple quite a bit. One of the questions I had was, you said they become obsolete pretty quick. How many years would someone have a simple? And then is it worth it just to start with the 401k if you think you're going to get there in 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, it would. One of the downsides of the simple that I didn't mention is that you're not able to make a rollover out of a simple IRA unless the simple IRA has been around for 2 years or you've been a participant in a simple IRA for 2 years, right? So typically sometimes we jump right into the 401k, startup 401k, because the volume contributions is going to be relatively high, or the business owner wants all that immediate flexibility, right? They're keyed in on definitely wanting the Roth side. Well, guess what? We're moving to the 401k first, right? We're not messing around too much with the simple. I'd say within a 5 to 10 year time frame, we're flipping from the simple, and it's not necessarily because of employee count, although in my mind that that does happen with some of our other faster growing businesses. Once you get past 10, 15 employees and you start getting some key people in there, they don't want to be messing around with a simple. They understand more so how a 401k works, even though they're very similar, but they want the flexibility of deferrals into a 401k and the Roth components and dealing with an investment choice and have a website presence and those types of things, right? That's what you're going to receive with a 401k. So, to answer that question, within 5 years is typically where we see that flip if, there's some pretty decent either growth in employee counts, growth in the income of the business where more would like to be sheltered, or just wanting a better plan design or more flexibility in that plan design. It surprisingly, it comes up faster than we think in most cases.
Well, the simple, your deferrals limited like $5,000 less, right? So if you have somebody who wants to max out,
right.
And then you can't.
Yeah, if you're somebody that wants to max out, right.
Which in most cases is probably the dentist only getting there. And you can't put the cash balance or profit sharing on top of a simple, right? That's 401k specific.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's marching orders as it relates to profit sharing and cash balance. Certain steps have to be taken in order to actually make cash balance contributions, which means that you're making a reasonable match and a certain amount of profit sharing contribution before you can even get into that cash balance level. So all three of those really have to play relatively closely together.
I have a couple clients that have done the cash balance and profit sharing. Is that a decision that can be made after year end to affect deductions for the prior tax year?
Yeah, it can. There's opportunities to kind of work through that and get that rolling. I mean, typically we'd like to make sure that we have a good handle on that before year end, but there is some opportunity to slide those dollars in there if you've got the right setup.
That's interesting too with the cash balance. I didn't realize how you can skew them based on different strata or whatever. Because I have one client who is a fairly young orthodontist, and he said it just wasn't going to benefit him enough because of the makeup of his employee group.
Yep, and that's true, right? So think of it this way, as a defined benefit with the formula being similar, the ultimate result or how you get to that result needs to be the same. So if you have a 60-year-old dentist and very young employees, if the ultimate goal is to get to a set amount or a specific benefit, that 60-year-old might only have 5 years of being able to make contributions. That's why those contributions to the 60-year-old are huge versus the contributions that would go in for somebody who's 30. So there's a huge disparity there, and it works really well within an older or aging group that has younger based employees. But it also, again, can work relatively well with income disparity. But you're right, if you've got a young doc who also has young staff, the contribution that the doc has to make to the rest of the employees per the contribution that the doc herself gets, that could be much closer than you think. There might not be as much value with that calculation.
Got it. So one thing you mentioned at the beginning was considering like the debt that the practice has. So a lot of these dentists will have practice debt or student loan debt. So what do you advise in that case? Should they be paying down that debt really quickly or stocking money away in their retirement plan? And I know here some of our partners feel that, do you really want all that money tied up in a qualified plan anyway?
Yeah, right. Especially if it's going to be simple IRA based or SEP IRA based, right? I mean, I think we'll all agree, I think we can agree, right, that tax rates are likely going to be higher in the future. I mean, if we're going to make a bet right now, historically low tax rates we've been at, they're not going to be able to continue. I think it's pretty common knowledge. So being able to defer today's tax rate in exchange for paying tomorrow's tax rate, especially if you're a young doc just starting out, doesn't make a lot of sense to me at all. So I would be, it's still a personal preference, right, versus debt and savings. Some people really hate debt and want to knock it out as fast as possible. Others also don't like that, but then take a look at the math side and say, well, my loan amount or my loan percentage, my debt service is only 4.5% thanks to relatively low interest rates. I think I can outperform that maybe in the market on a going forward basis, or at least have more flexibility with having short-term dollars. So if for whatever reason dollars don't flow to debt service, they don't necessarily, again, have to get shoved into retirement plans. Saving money on a non-qualified basis, joint accounts, individual accounts, or real estate purchases, other non-qualified assets that have the opportunity to diversify our tax risk going forward is still preferred. And again, especially with docs, we see this quite a lot. If they have some pretty significant student loan debt out there, or business-related debt, but don't quite want to pay it off, the math says, well, we really should take a look at paying it off. They may just want to stockpile short-term savings to the point where they feel the most comfortable, right? And there's no right or wrong answer to that. I've given up, trying to say how much cash is too much cash a long time ago, because there's just so much attachment to, sometimes, right, the math doesn't work out, especially today with how low interest rates are. But people really want to be secure with a certain level of short-term savings, and there's nothing inherently wrong with building that up, skipping a retirement plan in the short term here, and again, paying down that debt or building cash up, or vice versa, a combination of both. But it still will eventually come down to employee satisfaction and providing that as a benefit, because it is, they are pretty common benefit components like that, very common in today's environment.
Well, I do think the cost is not as much as people think. I mean, a 3 or 4% match on some of these salaries doesn't amount to a whole lot, in my opinion. I mean,
you're absolutely right. The outlay for the potential benefit for the doc is still huge, especially when it comes to deferral. And especially this is where as we trend more towards that 401k recommendation, even from day one, that Roth deferral is pretty solid, especially if they're brand new doc. Income's the lowest it's ever going to be, taxed at the historically low tax rates that they're dealing with today. A simple IRA, for its limitations, even though it's pretty easy to set up and administer, it's worth the extra cost of potential match on the 401k side. Again, there doesn't have to be a match, but it's worth the extra cost even of the admin just to be able to have access to a $19,500 Roth deferral in this type of environment. It seems like a no-brainer to me, especially for a new doc just starting out.
Do you have an idea of the administrative costs between a simple and a 401k? Like, what would be the difference for a plan year?
Yeah, I mean, with the simple you're talking about, it's maybe a couple $100 a year just in terms of administration, depending on who you latch on to. Fidelity or Vanguard will be lower on that administrative cost. It could be next to zero on an ongoing basis. The cost of the simple IRA is going to be borne by the participants in the expense ratios of the underlying investments that you're using. But again, if you go direct to a Fidelity or a Vanguard or even a Schwab platform, you can kind of get those costs dialed in and have that be relatively efficient. Moving to a 401k, you can get the same type of investment cost exposure, right? It can be relatively low depending on the platform that you go to. However, a third-party administrator, depending on how complicated the plan could be, it might be anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 a year, especially for a dentist size or a typical dentist practice. So it's not free, clearly, and it's not relatively cheap, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. But for $1,000 a year outlay to have a ERISA-based plan that your employees know more about the logistics about, that has the maximum flexibility, and you have the capability of running the Roth side, in my mind, it might be worth that outlay.
Yeah. So with the 401k, you have the option of running the pre-tax qualified contributions and the Roth contributions as well. Can you then split the 19.5 contribution limit between pre-tax and post-tax Roth contributions?
Yep, that's right. And that's what's perfect about the flexibility, right? So when we deal with our accountants, with our clients, so we talk about saving strategy for, let's say, 2021 and then 2022, we're always kind of looking at least at 2 years of saving strategy. We're able to ask you, where do we think taxes are going to fall this year? Where do we think we're going to be in 2022? All right, this year it might be Roth deferral or a mix. And then in 2022, it might be all pre-tax. If suddenly we see tax brackets jump up 20%, we can make that easy switch and be able to run the most efficient savings strategy for that specific tax year.
I don't know if I have any more questions on plans, Ryan. Do you have anything?
No, I think he covered everything that I had written here.
We have a couple other questions we kind of wanted to go through. One of the questions we had even before COVID, but now with COVID, a lot of our clients are sitting on a bunch of extra cash. And for the reason you said, they're kind of keeping it as a security. But where would you put that extra cash? I mean, they're not, let's say they've done enough in their retirement plans. So do you think a taxable investment is a good idea? I mean, the bank is not paying anything, you know that?
Yeah. We're searching every day. I mean, we can't find any better money market rates than anything you can find in an online bank. And there was a lot of decent ones. I mean, anywhere from a quarter of a percent to 0.5%, which is pretty decent in this environment. And a lot of these online banks have no minimums. You might be limited to a certain amount of transfers per month, but for just setting and forgetting dollars for a period of time, it's a pretty solid option. I wouldn't do any locking in CDs, even if they're short term. Those rates are less than some of these online money markets, or very similar, except you get all the flexibility of a money market. So CDs are kind of off the table. Short-term fixed income, again, isn't relatively exciting, especially if you're trying to deal with high quality, or in the event of, let's say, a high income earner and you want some municipal-based short-term fixed income. Those rates aren't inherently exciting either. It's clear that the Fed and their monetary policy is driving individuals to either invest dollars, hire new people, save those dollars in the market. We're being driven, right, to spend or invest in assets. And it's working, clearly, as we've seen with how the market has performed over the course, really, of the last 3 months has been pretty remarkable in and of itself. That said, I still would be looking at long-term investment of the market after you have kind of your short-term needs taken care of. If you've got enough short-term income set up where you feel comfortable, maybe let's say that's $20,000 in short-term savings, and you go, great, I'm happy with what's there. I've got some extra. What do we do with it? My next step really would be debt payoff, taking a look at what those interest rates are, and understanding that, okay, if I don't want to invest in the market, or I don't have a new car to buy, or a house upgrade that I want to deal with, or anything else that might be coming out there from an expense in the course of the next 3 years, if I don't want to rush to the market, I should at least be looking at knocking down some debt service that's costing me more than my money market balance is paying me. Right. But if you are willing to take a look at the market, which, again, I still think is a really solid long-term position, it might not be the best short-term move. I would stockpile that cash, maybe get it ready in a brokerage account or investment account. And if the market has a 10 to 15% swing, that's where I'm taking a look at adding dollars strategically at those dips. And we typically have anywhere from 1 to 2, 10 to 15% downturns in a year. It's probably hard to remember, but last year, right after our really awful and historically violent March into April, we did have the S&P and the NASDAQ both drop by almost 15% in October. And it offered another time period for you to get into the market at a reasonable rate, although any time last year, post-March, that you were adding dollars in the market was a good time to continue to add dollars. So I wouldn't say that it's out of the ordinary to want to invest. I mean, clearly within our retirement plans, right, clients are investing on a monthly basis, and you should, via that dollar cost averaging. It helps smooth out some of the volatile swings with the remaining portion of your portfolio. So very important for you to continue systematically saving, especially in a long-term retirement plan component. But yes, with some of the short-term cash or outside cash dollars, strategic debt pay down or long-term investment, buying at the dips, I think makes a lot of sense.
I like that advice. It's what Ryan and I were talking. It's hard to not get caught up in what's going on with the market right now, and Bitcoin and Elon Musk. And I mean, yeah, you feel like we've already missed out on it.
What's interesting, right, is that this is the exact feeling. This is the exact opposite feeling that people were having last March, right, where everything was, it's got to keep going lower. We're never going to get out of this. It's an absolute nightmare. I want my money out of the market. And you just have to think at those times, I mean, it's not best to have money out of the market ever, but there's times where you need to make conscious decisions to say, do I want to add more strategically, or do I not really want to add as much strategically? And we're in this time period where maybe we don't want to add as much because there's likely to be an opportunity at some point. Does it mean we hold everything back? Like I said, no, we still want our systematic contributions going to the long-term retirement plan side. But like last March, I mean, if you took all of your cash and a worst case scenario would have been, and not that I would suggest to this, but, grabbing home equity from your home, if you got to refinance and had some extra cash and threw it to the market, could be a once in a lifetime, scenario for a lot of individuals to get access to components at that low of a price. But that doesn't mean that there's never going to be an opportunity to invest. There just might be more strategic times coming up here. So as low as we were last March, as great as we feel now, it will likely turn and there'll be some opportunity.
Can you think of a point in history where we've had a similar trend or similar 10-month period? Or is this like pretty wild?
I mean, there's not one. And in March and April, I did a lot of research about what was happening, especially, as it was connected to, the Spanish flu pandemic, because I was really interested in communicating to clients about how we felt about the market and those types of things. Fact is, though, we've never seen a market downturn as fast and as furious as it was. We set multiple new records in terms of down days in a row and how fast the market moved and dropped certain percentage points in how many days. It just wasn't, we've never seen anything like it. And it's not a really solid comparison, of course, to a 1918 type kind of scenario, nor is it very analogous to what we saw in 2008, although the speed of how the market took a dive was also very quick there. It wasn't as fast as this time around. So we've seen something that's unprecedented. But since 2008, really, because that's the last major correction we had. I mean, you can go back to 2000 and 2002, the dot-com crash, right? Even though the dot-com crash happened and we had 3 years in a row of stock market negativity, most of that was concentrated to U.S. large caps. Other portions of the market did relatively well. I mean, if you had a balanced, a 60-40 mixed portfolio from 2000 to 2002, you still had a positive return. In 2008, fourth quarter 2018, fiscal cliff issue of 2011. I mean, we saw large market crashes and everything was off. Even fixed income wasn't a very good safe haven. But what's interesting about these time periods, the faster they go, the faster you go from, S&P 3800 to S&P 2000, the faster that happens, the faster we've seen the market come back. So I wasn't shocked, I guess, to see the market recover in 2020. I expected some sort of recovery, even with a lot of uncertainty. I didn't expect it to be that fast. And that was interesting about this. And, if you go back and trace what happened in fourth quarter 2018, when the market almost lost 20% over 3 months, it was back to even in quarter one of 2019. First quarter, we had it back. Same thing in 2011. Fiscal cliff issues, dark market downturn in quarter four, we had it back relatively quickly. Even 2008, which was protracted a little bit longer, and honestly, the reason why that recovery didn't happen as quick is that the feds did not step in with stimulus nearly as quickly as they did this time around in 2020. They took their time in 2008. They eventually came up with a pretty decent stimulus package, and then the market kind of recovered and took off from there. So anything in my mind that we'll see catastrophic going forward, even though it has no or next to zero parallel in the past, I think we're going to see markedly larger recoveries. So unfortunately, larger volatilities but faster cycles, especially with the way, news moves these days. So you're seeing it happen on this upside. We're getting way too much recovery way too fast, and it's eventually going to snap back in some way, shape, or form. Or we're just going to hit a wall at S&P 3,800 that it is now and sit there for another couple of years while the economy does a little bit better, but the market kind of trends on that line for a period of time. But I just don't think that's going to happen. There's still, to your point, Meagan, a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines, people needing to know what to do with it. At any sign of a relatively serious pullback, there's going to be some significant investment back in the market. And I don't think any subsequent downturn is going to last that long, or future subsequent downturns are going to last that long. That's kind of what's interesting about this process. But so yeah, long way around to say there's nothing that compares to this that I've seen. It was interesting comparing what happened in 1918 with that pandemic and how quickly the economy got back on track. By 1920, it was kind of full swing. Might be a little bit different this time around because it seems like we're protracting this. In 18, they didn't have vaccines developed very quickly, so a lot of people got sick and a lot of people died, and it kind of worked through everybody's system relatively quickly. This time around, we're mitigating deaths to a degree, which is great, and the vaccines are here relatively quickly, which is great. But we've kind of got a protracted rollout of, we're just not getting back to normal from an economic sense that, what happened in 1918. So that's a little bit different of a parallel there. But it's interesting looking at that historically and understanding this is not a long-term deal. We'll eventually be back. We're probably going to be back on track with a lot of things within the next year or two, especially, with business travel. And that's really the kind of last piece to, jump on board here with recovery, hotel and airline and just general travel-related components. And that should be online, from what I understand, in larger degrees within the balance of the next 18 months.
I just recently looked up Marriott stock price and Delta stock price, and those are actually they're not quite to where they were a year ago, but they're trending up. So looks like a little opportunity in that sector.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we saw they're not quite where they were, February, January of last year, but we've seen a really big rotation that started happening in a little bit in September when we saw that S&P and NASDAQ correction. And then when the three different vaccines came out on 3 different Mondays in November, all with, a 90% or better efficiency rate, that's when the market started to take off in that sector. There was a big shift away from large cap, especially tech, to those value components. And it's carried through really this entire time period. The market is, as you know, always forward looking. So the market was definitely on top of understanding, okay, here's some vaccines coming. They're going to be valuable to get the economy back on track. Let's start investing or reinvesting back in these businesses. And you saw a lot of them pop. But clearly, we're not back to where they are, at least from a stock price perspective, because a lot of them, unfortunately, aren't back yet from an earnings or cash flow perspective. So again, that's where the market is forward looking and saying, well, their cash flows will eventually be worth this, and we're willing to buy in at this specific price or drive the stock price to this level. It might not match today's reality just quite yet, but eventually it will catch up, and it will be faster, of course, if we see a more efficient vaccine distribution and kind of lowering of complications of the virus for individuals that are either not vaccinated or vaccinated, but still dealing with either the variants or stuff like that. So, but you're right. I've never been really a big individual stock guy. There's a lot of volatility associated with that. A big portion of my portfolio is mutual funds and index-based components. But I typically tend to look at stocks where I'm familiar with the underlying product, right? So I'm pretty familiar with flying on an airline. I'm pretty familiar with using a bank. I'm pretty familiar with, Apple or other clothing or retail-based components. So I watch those a little bit more closely. And, if there's if you notice you're using a lot of a certain product in your house, that's usually one of my favorite things to do and say, okay, what is their stock price doing? Can I take a look at that? And I know a little bit more about it, or I like this particular product. Is there a trend going on that? And in this environment, it's probably worth looking a little bit more closely at those pieces, especially if you have, favorites like Disney that you frequent, that will probably pop up. Or again, you typically take multiple trips per year on an airline and you haven't been on one in a couple of years, but you're starting to think about moving that way. Those are all really good indications to, if you're looking around for individual equities, look at those types of components and see where they're at.
More good advice. That's what we have been doing with our kids, and they pick some winners with their little fun money. Switching gears a little bit, we as tax providers, I feel like we know a little too much about financial planning, and we get some questions that I'd just rather not get. And so can you talk about why it's a good idea for an individual to work with a financial planner, or what sort of mistakes people make by not working with a planner, or how the process works in general?
Yeah, the big mistake was evident in 2020 when the market took a dive and people were panicking and either sold at the inopportune time, or didn't invest at the right time, or they didn't take advantage of low interest rates and refinance, or just an amalgamation of stuff happened last year where it's really important to have a trusted individual to talk to. And yes, it's important to work with solid individuals like us and yourselves as it relates to getting advice in a timely fashion, take advantage of what's happening. I think the real issue is that people are kind of in the middle of this. They either, I don't care if they do it on their own, as long as they're informed and kind of making these decisions. That's one side of the equation, or, hey, work with some trusted advisors and do it yourself. I'm sure you see the same type of, when you're going through or looking at somebody that's done a TurboTax for the last couple of years and they just didn't keep up on tax. There's certain things you can do on your own as long as you're paying attention to them. And so I usually tell people either go that direction, pay enough attention to it and do it on your own, or work with trusted individuals. The middle is the worst place you could be, because if you've got a couple of people that maybe sold you some products or you do a little bit of work with that are not paying attention to you at that CFO level that they need to be paying attention, you're getting the worst advice possible, meaning you're paying a high cost to do the same type of thing that you were missing out on before, right? There isn't enough proactive advice happening. And we see that a lot, unfortunately. So we of course picked up a lot of new business in 2020, both individuals and businesses. And the common theme was, I don't get this type of advice from the current person I was working with. And I see it all the time. And it's especially true on the investment side, or it's just as true on the investment side as it is on the tax side. They're just not getting the right type of advice out there, or not spending enough time, right, to do it. I know it's difficult to find people that you can trust, but that's hopefully what this, your podcast is all about, giving out really comprehensive advice, connecting with individuals that, should be trustworthy in the community, that if somebody wants to go to that advisor direction, they've got already some good leads on that, or at least they're hearing the type of advice that's incredibly important. Like I said, if somebody wants to go out and do it on their own, great. But just please, let's do it this way and think about doing it this way and stay on top of it a little bit more systematically, and you're going to be in good shape. But please don't get anywhere near the middle of, well, I'm going to do it myself, and then slowly get into listening to a couple people that don't have the big picture in mind, right? So that's why the planning aspect of this is so important. So our industry especially, right, there's so many products sold or strategies put into place that cost quite a bit, that have no planning done behind them, right? We unravel a lot of that stuff to say, why do you have this particular product? Well, I was told it was going to do this, this, and this. Well, from a planning perspective, we don't need that, or it's not efficient, or let's do something completely different because there's not an end game for where this is going. And unfortunately, that's, the norm in our industry. And I'm sure that's why people are turned off, from working with an individual or wanting to do stuff on their own, because they don't want to be put in that position where, well, I might have to buy something, or I'm going to be sold this particular strategy. What we do best is make our clients understand exactly why we're doing what we're doing, the benefits of specific strategy that we're using. And it's really simple. I mean, there's nothing complicated behind what we're doing. It's just like you guys, we're spending enough time understanding the details to say, based on your situation, you should do this or this. And we'll help you make the decision. There's no really right or wrong answer. You, the CEO, the client are making the decision. But we're going to give you all the information necessary to make the best decision possible. And we feel really strongly to be able to back up that decision not only today, but 30 years from now. And a lot of our industry just doesn't take the time to do that.
Yeah, I saw it myself with my parents. Never used a planner, and my dad, like you said, he put his time in, but eventually once they used a planner, they were able to retire early and more comfortably than they ever thought was possible. And every day my mom will say it was the best decision they ever made.
Thanks for bringing that up. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking about, the dangers of our business, but the positives, yes, of working for us. I heard it all in 2020. Hey, we didn't have to worry about this. We knew you and the team were taking care of it. We knew that our long-term plan was on track. Yes, our portfolio was off 15, 20% in a short time. But based on the information you were giving us, we knew that we were still able to deal with our distribution strategy for the next at least 5 to 10 years, regardless of what the stock market was up to. So yeah, it's taking all the emotion out of this and treating your personal finance, really similar to how you treat a business. And though there's a lot of people that don't treat a business like a business either. But the same mindset, right? Let's take all the emotion out of it, try to do the best possible thing, and build a working model plan for 1, 3, 5, 10 year and beyond time periods.
Well, this was all great. Ryan, do you have anything you wanted to get out there?
Well, I did actually. So I get a lot of questions from clients about the backdoor Roth. It seems like everybody thinks it's a good idea at this point. And I was wondering, is there ever a scenario that you find that it doesn't make sense to do either a backdoor Roth conversion, or I have a couple clients that are above the age of 59 and a half and actually just took the withdrawal, didn't put it into a Roth IRA, but took the withdrawal and paid the tax on it. And I'm just wondering if you ever see a scenario where it doesn't make sense to do that, given the fact that tax rates are more than likely going to go up in the future.
Yeah, I mean, to answer kind of your last point first, anybody that's, over 59 and a half and before 72 should really be thinking about some sort of strategic Roth conversion or distribution strategy that allows you to pay tax on those pre-tax assets at what we think is a more favorable rate, right? So that's probably our biggest value add to clients who retire before 72 is to say, what's our next 5-year game plan strategy look like to control whatever tax rate we want to control? And typically we're filling up to the 24% bracket because depending on future, required minimum distributions, they're likely going to be at that 24% rate in a couple of years. It might even be higher if we see income tax rates change. So why not pay 24% strategically now when we know the rate is, and then either save those dollars via a Roth conversion and not have to pay tax on them again, in theory, or like you said, just take the dollars out and stockpile to a non-qualified side where we can hopefully get a step up in basis in the future if we pass Generation 2, or at least deal with, hopefully, what has normally been lower ordinary income tax rates. So most certainly, I think that's the number one strategy to take a look at from a distribution perspective. We kind of, hit everything on the accumulation side, which was, let's use as much Roth contribution as we can. We're not going to be able to always control that, right? Because the employer match is always going to be pre-tax. Social Security is going to be a pre-tax asset. We can't control that income coming in the future. Any profit sharing or cash balance components are all pre-tax based, but we've got flexibility on the other stuff. When you talk about then the backdoor Roth, that's an accumulation tool that puts us hopefully in a better distribution place. Downside of the backdoor Roth is that you've got to stay on top of it, right? You'd like to do that year over year and kind of click through that $6,000 contribution, make sure we get it converted. However, if you have outside IRA assets, if you decided that you left your former employer, you didn't like your employer's plan after you left, you want to roll those assets into an IRA. If you've got an outside IRA and you're not going to be able to effectively run backdoor Roth strategies. The reason is the IRS takes a look at your after-tax IRAs and your pre-tax IRAs. And if you said, well, I want to convert 100% of that after-tax IRA using the backdoor Roth conversion, the IRS says, well, you're going to have to now this year convert 100% of your pre-tax IRA that's still out there, right? So there's this percentage component that really gets messed up if you've got outside IRA assets. So there's a significant amount of our clients that have outside IRA assets. Can you go through the machinations of taking your outside IRA assets and shoving them, rolling them back into your workplace 401k plan and setting your slate clean to be able to have no outside assets and run these backdoor opportunities? Yes, you do. But there's a lot of work involved with that. And there's a lot of course, as you guys know, 1098s floating around out there, that kind of stuff where, or 5498s, excuse me, we're making contributions, taking distributions in and out. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to track. I'm less excited, I guess, about backdoor Roth stuff just because there should be enough opportunity to get Roth exposure out there via the 19.5 pre-tax, the 19.5 Roth deferral component, and then maybe non-qualified say that's out there. But again, I think backdoor has an opportunity to be used there, but honestly, I guess I'd rather, just with the work that you've got to go do and go through it, to keep an after-tax IRA out there with that's not a big deal either. I mean, you still have that basis you're able to take out tax-free down the road. I guess I've been a fan strategically, maxing out the Roths where you can, and then next level would be non-qualified savings. Give us some more flexibility, give clients more flexibility in a short-term spending cycle for the stuff that we were talking about before, whether it's increased savings or debt pay down or kids' education funding, those types of things. So you bring up, it's a really interesting topic. It's not something we're doing with 100% of clients because, one, we physically can't sometimes in the case of outside IRA assets, but in some other cases that there's just other priorities that kind of get in the way that I'd actually choose before the backdoor Roth scenario, especially if they're running a Roth retirement plan. If they're not, then that usually comes to the forefront.
Thank you.
Yeah, I always seem to hear about the backdoor Roths when something has gotten screwed up. So, and there's a lot of digging around.
I mean, yeah, you guys are living it, right? And even if we were working with a client exclusively for the next 30 years and did still would feel like, okay, well, there's some benefit, yes, but I think we can get equal benefit from concentrating in other areas, especially if they've got a lot of stuff going on as it relates to other savings goals or kids, college funding, those types of things that might take some precedence over backdoor Roth. And again, honestly, there are a lot of accounts that we work with that are anti-Roth just because they're still the mindset that you don't want to give the government anything when you don't have to. And they might reverse Roth regulations at some point in the future where some of those dollars are going to be taxable. Well, yes, maybe the growth could be taxable on the Roth IRA side. It's still valuable to have out there long term. But like I said, I think there's enough value in current Roth options with deferrals to then make a shift to some of these other dollars at $6,000 to $12,000 a year to say, well, I'm going to beef up my short-term non-qualified account. I'm going to invest in the market very similar to what I was going to do on the Roth side, but now I've got some control over when to use it, how flexible it is. I might have 5 different savings goals that are coming up that these dollars can be used for. I guess I like more of that flexibility as well.
Well, Jerod, thank you so much. This was awesome. We like to end on
you're welcome.
A little bit of a fun note. So I know you're a big Brewer fan. We got hopefully opening day coming up on April 1st. How many of the past opening days have you been to? Have you missed a year?
No, I hit all of them since '98, which is good. Although clearly I wasn't in attendance last year. I'm hoping to get there this year. I know that the city of Milwaukee has passed, or working on passing in a kind of a larger capacity component. I think the Bucks, right, are trying to get some seating by the end of the month, and I think it'll be a pretty good indication of what baseball might be able to do. I mean, even if it's 20%, 25% capacity, that's still 10, 12,000 individuals. Hopefully, I'll be lucky enough to be one of those 10 to 12. We'll see. It was disappointing enough. Well, gosh, it was the last thing, right, that you think about in a very trying time like last year, but some of those creature comforts of being able to do some of the things you'd like to do kind of stick in your mind a little bit more so. And I'm hoping to get back. We'll see. If you've got any avenues, let me know. And
you're
we'll have to trade ideas back and forth, right?
You're a season ticket holder just like me. So I think, didn't we get to pick last week if we wanted to be limited capacity or not? So that's what I chose, but I don't think I have the opening day package.
Yeah, who knows, right, where that's going to go. And it's interesting to kind of take a look at that, how they have to plan that. It's really complicated, right? They don't know if they're going to have 10,000 fans at every game this year, if it's only a couple months, and then full capacity, or, of course, zero. And to be able to talk to ticket holders to go, hey, we're choose this or this or this, or let's think about this. It's really hard. And I don't envy what they're up to, but again, it's an industry that's an entertainment component, so it's a nice release for all of us. And they're certainly not frontline workers, clearly, but they do have complications in their jobs, just like everybody does these days.
Life has become a little harder. All right, well, we'll add your contact information to the show notes where the podcast is listed, and we really appreciate your time, and hopefully we can send some clients your way.
Yeah, hey, if I can be of any help whatsoever, if you want to do more of these, it seems like it's a kind of a really awesome platform. Get solid information out to your listeners, which is great. Or if, again, I could eventually do something in person if you have client-related stuff. I mean, we're trying to do webinars on a quarterly basis, and I think near the end of this year, we haven't fleshed it out yet, but we're looking at accounting firms to come in and have discussions. So we'll make sure that we reciprocate and get you guys on the schedule when we can for a webinar in today's environment, or face-to-face stuff, hopefully, maybe later this year.
That sounds great. Well, and share your webinar information with us too, because if that's something we can pass around if people are interested in too. I know you.
Yeah, you know what? I really should do that.
It's interesting. Our clients listen to these podcasts and webinars. I mean, they're all over this stuff more than you would think, because I don't go home and listen to work type stuff after work, but
yeah, right.
Clients like to. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot, Jerod. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jerod.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Cornerman. Be sure to leave us a review and subscribe to us wherever podcasts are found. For more insights and information, visit us at bullmoosefinancial.com.